Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Black Table Talk as hosted by the Alliant LA-Campus Black Student Alliance. My name is Bianca Broomfield, and I serve as the current chair-elect of BSA. We are so excited to have you all join us this afternoon for an engaging conversation centering on thriving as an early career psychologist. So we are very honored to have our guest here, Dr. Terrill Taylor, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology and is affiliated with the Counseling Psychology PhD program. He joined the University of Maryland in the fall of 2023 after completing his doctoral studies in counseling psychology at the University of North Dakota. Dr. Taylor completed his pre-doctoral internship at the Counseling and Mental Health Center at the University of Texas at Austin, and he is a former scholar in residence at the Institute for the Study of Race and Culture at Boston College. While a graduate student, Dr. Taylor was involved in several leadership positions, including chair of the APAGS Committee for the Advancement of Racial and Ethnic Diversity, or APAGS Cared, and campus representative co-chair for APA Division 45. He received several professional awards for his research and service, including the Jeffrey S. Tanaka Memorial Dissertation Award in Psychology from the APA Committee on Ethnic Minority Affairs and the Distinguished Student Research Award. He is the current director of the Restoring H.O.P.E Research Lab at the University of Maryland, where he and his research team examine issues of race and racism with specific emphasis on intersectionality, racial disparities in systems of justice, anti-Black racism, and restorative justice. His overall aspirations are to assist others in cultivating brighter futures and paving the way for liberation, hope, and healing in the lives of others. Thank you so much, Dr. Taylor, for being with us today. The floor is yours.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate the introduction, and I appreciate this opportunity to connect and talk with you all a little bit about just my professional journey from being a graduate student to an early career professional. But really, I think a lot of the time that I'm hoping that we can have today is really going to be built in community and dialogue. So I'll provide a brief overview of what I'll talk about, and then we can kind of jump into some questions that I have for you, and then I'm happy to kind of answer some questions you all have for me. But as stated, I'm currently an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of Maryland, College Park. Today, I have a few things in particular that I'll talk about. I'll give a little bit more background introduction to me and my professional trajectory and pathways, talk a little bit about some of my areas of research and my focus of research and how that research has helped to cultivate how I view professional development and some ideas and some things that I think should be on your radars as you all start to think about professional development, moving from student to professional, and ways to brand yourself. I'll offer a few different resources that I mentioned. I have a few questions that I'm hoping that we can engage in some dialogue with together, and then I'll turn the floor to you all to ask me questions as well. As stated, my professional background and journey, I'm originally from Austin, Texas, and I oftentimes, when I talk about myself and as a researcher, as a clinician and professional, I really center my experiences and how I started off in higher education. I never in a million years would have imagined that I would be an assistant professor now, because my early experiences in higher education were actually not that great. I went to three undergraduate institutions. I was absolutely that delayed graduate. I think if we were looking at like from high school graduation, my 4-year track to graduating post high school, I would have been a graduate in 2012, and I didn't graduate until 2015. So it definitely took me a little bit of while to figure my way through undergrad. But once I found my way and I found my passion, I kind of stuck with it there. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute with a reflection question that I have. But went to University of Houston, got my bachelor's in human development and family studies, and then I went off to North Dakota, where I was in their PhD program, earned my master's along the way in counseling, graduated at the University of North Dakota after completing my pre-doctoral internship at the Counseling and Mental Health Center at the University of Texas at Austin. And during that same time, as mentioned, I was a scholar in resident at the Institute for the Study of Race and Culture under the leadership of Dr. Alex Peterson, who is the current director. And currently, since graduating, I've been at the University of Maryland, College Park as an assistant professor affiliated with the Counseling Psychology PhD program. An overview of my research and the themes of my research in general, it's really situated under the larger umbrella of social justice. But in particular, as we think about social justice, it's thinking about ways in which we're critiquing and understanding how psychology has engaged in efforts of us towards understanding social justice in a different way, but also the ways in which our understanding of social justice, multiculturalism, engaging with oppressed and under-resourced individuals or individuals who've been historically disenfranchised can be increased through our policies, through our practices, procedures, efforts, etc. A lot of my work is really situated on aspects of race and racism, specifically with regards to individuals who've been impacted by the criminal legal system and ways that we can really cultivate new opportunities for hope, liberation, and healing for individuals and communities of color in particular. Within that vein, restorative justice is a central element of my work. Restorative justice is really thinking about individuals who've engaged in actions of harm or wrongdoing, as well as individuals who've been impacted by harm and wrongdoing. How are we working collaboratively to understand individuals' thoughts, their emotions, their experiences, interpersonally and professionally, that moves us towards greater understanding, greater empathy, and overall greater connection. So in the restorative justice vein, I'm really thinking about assessment and evaluation. What are the psychotherapy outcomes, and how do we engage in consultation with community members who are engaged in similar on-the-ground work with regards to restoring communities of color, restoring wellness, restoring hope, leading individuals towards liberation. And then the last aspect of my work is really centered around the aspect of racial justice. So I look at restorative justice, but also connected within that racial justice. So thinking about creating equitable and just systems and policies for individuals who've been historically impacted by harm, violence, racism, oppression, etc. So broad strokes overview of my research, the themes of my research. But I'm not really here to talk about my research today. I'm really here to think about my own personal narrative and personal trajectory into psychology, and hopefully to hear from you all a little bit about your own personal trajectory into psychology. So I want to take a pause here and just have a conversation, and I'll leave the slide up for us to kind of reflect. But if anyone's willing to just come off screen, come off mute for a bit, and just share what inspired you to pursue a career in psychology, and how do you feel like your engagements in psychology, your motivation to remain in psychology has evolved over time?
I'll go. I entered into psychology based on a AP class I took in high school, and it was the only AP test I passed. So I was like, maybe I'm good at this. And then I realized that a lot of my friends were also comfortable telling me their problems, and I felt like I was understanding and empathetic and didn't judge very harshly. So I said, maybe, I should start charging for this. And then yeah, once I actually like got into undergrad, I was just fascinated, especially once I realized like a lot of the more deeper principles behind psychology and what it could actually mean for us. So
Well, I appreciate that, Kyle. Michaela?
Hi, yeah. So I'm listening to this presentation and I'm like, wow, we have a lot in common in terms of interests. So I'm actually a part of the MCCP emphasis that we have here at Alliant, which is like mostly known as the social justice emphasis. But what got me into psychology was actually my family. We have a really big kind of psych background here. I have aunts who are social workers. My mom works with juvenile facilities, working with kids. She testifies in court. So that's what got me into all this. So I would love to be a forensic and clinical psychologist working with DMH. But yeah, so I think in general, I'm really inspired by just like caring about people and specifically looking at themes of race and stuff. Right now, for I guess what you would consider our master's thesis, I'm looking at dating preferences and how things like racism and colonialism impact that for specifically the Black community. So yeah, I think everything you're doing is really awesome.
Nice. That sounds like a really much needed and interesting project. Hope to hear more about it at some point.
I'll jump in now. So I actually started in mass communications in my undergrad, and that in the middle or in the first year of pursuing my mass communications degree, I graduated with it, and I thought I want to work with people in the masses. It eventually developed to a deeper level of wanting more one-on-one understanding of people, but also human behavior. And there was a psychology class in there. But within my first year of college, I discovered my biological father's story, which was really a big influence of his mental well-being, really being unresourced. So my father being a Black man who was racially profiled and then eventually losing his life to the depths of post-traumatic stress disorder from a racially profiled police brutality incident. It really sparked me as I became a mother and I started to pursue the idea of psychology affecting people and how people are affected by each other. And then I was like blending it all into the understanding of my father's death. And I was like, oh, his depression and all of this stuff and how it all systematically really impacted him. It pushed me into an advocacy as I pursued psychology for so many reasons. But eventually it was really ingrained in this idea of really pursuit of understanding how we move and act as beings, but also how the system can affect people. I'm in the multi-interest option at Alliant. So I kind of like all of the things, but I really end up honing in on how family effects, but also the understanding of the system. So that's what brought me here to really kind of forge for more just kind of being able to represent that insight by being a clinician who works and understands the understanding of it and being able to just really push it out there more. So yeah.
Nice. Absolutely. Very, very much needed. And in lots of ways, I think it resonates with some of the things that brought me into psychology, which I'll talk about. I'll give my answer to this. But before I do, anybody else want to share?
Well, I just wanted to share that I'm here in a different vein. I'm an administrator here at Alliant, and I don't have a career in psychology, but I'm really interested in learning more about students here and their experiences and what's brought them here. So I don't want to come across as like rude if I'm not answering your questions, but I'm really kind of observing. So I just wanted to let you know.
Yeah, definitely. No problem. I appreciate that. Thanks for being here as well. Well, I'll share a little bit about my response here, in particular, what inspired me to pursue a career in psychology. And oftentimes when I talk and I'm speaking with students, I'll say that I have probably the most unconventional path towards becoming a psychologist and especially a professor in lots of ways. And that's because I originally had no idea even about graduate school. As an undergrad, first generation college student, I really thought it was okay. You go off to college, you get this 4-year degree, and then you go off and work. Well, as I mentioned earlier, my delay in finishing my undergraduate degree was because I spent a year in between that time incarcerated. So while being incarcerated, I experienced so many of the challenges with regards to stigma and oppression, not being able to find adequate work, really thinking about a lot of the barriers that really impact individuals who are trying to re-enter society. And for me, that was so much of my lived experience in reality. So when I started to really try to pursue my education again, post-incarceration, I was in a class and it was a research methods class. And my professor at the time, he was a school psychologist. And he came up to me after class and he said, your writing is at the graduate school level. Have you considered going to graduate school? And at that point, I had no idea about the different paths in psychology, or again, I had no knowledge really about what graduate school entailed. I had no knowledge about what research was or what the process of research involved. But he gave me the opportunity to join his research lab. And by joining his research lab that was focused on motivational interviewing, and building peer mentorship with individuals in the local community in the Third Ward area of Houston, it really gave me the opportunity to, one, understand, work with graduate students, understand the process of research, but then it also cultivated this new profound opportunity that I never once would have imagined about me envisioning myself having an impact in serving others through some degree of engagement within the profession of psychology. I wasn't even a psychology undergraduate major. So I really pay lots of respects to the mentors that have really spearheaded my professional journey into psychology, and how that motivation has continued to evolve over time has really been based on this aspect of mentorship, connection, storytelling, and really countering a lot of the narratives, speaking from a CRT perspective, really counter storytelling. So countering the narratives around individuals who have lived experiences that we may not traditionally associate with your typical psychologist or your typical professor. So that's a little bit a part of my personal narrative and what really inspired me to pursue a career in psychology, and how that motivation has evolved over time. You'll start to notice that there's some threads with regards to my research and my lived experience that really provide this unique synergy and give lots of meaning to the work that I do. So I go on from there. I'll spend some time talking about professional development, what professional development has really looked like for me, moving from the student to the early career professional. And a few pieces of the puzzle are things that I've learned along the way through my conversations with students and through the various different roles and leadership engagements that I've had. For one, I think it's always important to recognize that even in your roles now as graduate students, you are starting to develop the trajectory of building your own professional identity. So you can cultivate your own lane and what you want that to look like. It starts by thinking about for those of you who are engaged in research, what are the types of research questions that you want to ask? For your clinical engagements, what are the type of experience that you want? Who are the populations that are important for you to work with? How do you create the opportunities if the opportunities aren't readily available? Or what can you do now to put yourself in the best position to seek those opportunities moving forward? Excuse me. The next aspect is, again, to continue to think about what's meaningful for you and how you aspire to create change. So not just cultivating your own lane for the professional identity you want to have moving forward, but how you want to impact others through your roles as graduate students, through your role as an early career professional, and then also throughout the legacy of your career. So starting to think now about what you want your career to look like 10 years from now, and what you want your career to look like 20 and 25, 30 years from now, are all ways in which you can start to build this web of meaningful connections and understand the trajectory that you have towards inspiring others and creating change in the world. While doing so, I think it's also important not to limit yourself and not to feel as if your potential is limited or defined based off of your mentor, for example, the type of, I have to do the type of research that my mentor wants me to do, or I have to do clinical work in this certain way because this is what my program says. They want me to do this type of work. Well, I think it's always important for you to recognize that you have that freedom to define your own path and to take those and take making meaningful decisions around the choices and decisions you want to have and the way in which you want to show up as a professional. So starting to think about those things and really critiquing and having conversations and connections with others that help move you in the right direction towards understanding yourself with regards to your current present identity and then the identity you want to have later throughout your career. There are also a couple other key considerations just for professional growth that I want to kind of just share. In particular, parts of, as I mentioned, I think a lot of my experience was really built on this aspect of introspection and self-reflection. So every opportunity that I had as a student, thinking about my career, thinking about how I wanted to do research or how I wanted to show up, was a continuous process that continued to evolve over time. For example, when I started graduate school, I really centered a lot of my focus around wanting to do work on racism and internalized oppression. And it had nothing to do with the criminal legal system. In lots of ways, there was lots of internalized stigma and shame about my past experiences that in many cases, I would tremble even when I thought about the aspect of, well, I can't tell people about this part of my lived experience and part of my reality. It brought so much just discomfort to where it was something that I felt like I couldn't talk about and I had to hide and I had to separate that part of my life from my professional part of my life. And through lots of self-reflection and having conversations and taking meaningful risks, I then got to the point of understanding, well, this is a central and unique role that in lots of ways provides me a unique vantage point and unique opportunity to understand the lived experiences of individuals I'm hoping to also work with. So through that self-reflection, I was able to really think about my professional development in a new way and really challenging a lot of the stereotypes and assumptions that exist beforehand. I also encourage you to really seek active and ongoing mentorship, and mentorship beyond just your current academic advisor or the people that you're connected with at your own institution. For me, I had mentors nationally. I had mentors who were individuals that I met at conferences or individuals that I've reached out to just by sending a random email one day, just wanting to create some connection or thinking about some synergy between our interests, or thinking about ways in which they could be beneficial or helpful to my own kind of learning and development. So I encourage you all to think about mentors, either people that you do know or people that you wish you would have a better relationship with, and just reaching out and having some conversations with folks and seeing how they could assist you on your journey. In that same vein, take advantage of opportunities to network. So really thinking about attending networking events, conferences. I think you all just being here today is this aspect of networking. You're establishing new relationships and you're getting new information. So taking advantage and looking for opportunities, applying for opportunities. So applying for different awards, applying for different fellowships and things of recognition are also other ways where you could build your professional network. In that vein, I had lots of leadership opportunities as a graduate student, and even as an early career professional now, I still remain engaged in leadership. So I do think that engaging in professional service to whatever communities are important to you are also ways that you can really sustain yourself as a psychologist, as well as building professional networks of other individuals who can kind of help lead you along the way. So the mentorship for me was also connected to leadership. So through my leadership, I met new mentors, and that also created these larger networks for me to really cultivate an identity in psychology. I encourage you to think about ways that you can set goals. So setting both short-term, mid-term goals for what you want to accomplish. For example, for me, when I came into my assistant professor role, the very first thing that I did is I started the year off by thinking about these are the things that I want to accomplish before I go for tenure. And then I broke that down. Okay, before I go for tenure, at the 3-year mark, these are the papers that I want to publish, or these are the experiences the classes that I want to teach, the experiences I want to obtain, and then breaking that down even further. Okay, these are the things I want to do within year 1. So really thinking about ways you can break down your goals and really continue to develop your professional identity over time. That may give a nice kind of roadmap for you moving ahead. For those of you who want to pursue licensure, I do think that familiarizing yourself with the licensure requirements and the state or the country that you plan to practice is really important. I am currently navigating the licensure process, so happy to talk about what my experience has been like with that so far. One thing I do encourage, in particular, I'm in the state of Maryland, but just now learning through the process of applying that pre-doctoral hours here in Maryland count after your first year of graduate school. So learning different mechanisms or different things like that can be helpful for you as you continue your professional development. So getting started early will never hurt you in that regard. It will just help you be more prepared when you do go up for licensure. I'll transition and pivot and talk a little bit about branding yourself. I will say that branding for me is still a continuous process. I am not a very huge social media person, and I'm also recognizing through lots of my mentorship conversations, et cetera, the importance of building a brand and the importance of putting yourself out there. So this one's still work in progress for me as an early career psychologist, but I'll give you some of the information that I do have from my current process of branding my research website and my research lab. For one, I've learned that having greater consistency across the platforms that you're using helps to maintain this visual identity of what it is that you're wanting to focus on. So I'll show some examples in particular in a moment for my research lab and ways in which we've been consistent across the images that we use, the color tones, the font, et cetera, across various types of publications, social media, other communications that you put out, et cetera. thinking about ways that you can really articulate and highlight your specialized area of interest or your skills and training experiences through professionalism. So displaying this professional demeanor in your interactions, your online presence, as well as other engagements that you have when you're meeting with people, finding opportunities to contribute to articles, blog posts, and engaging in different presentations to widen your reach are ways that which these are all a part of how you brand yourself and you brand your professional identity as an early career professional and throughout your career as a psychologist. Engaging with a professional community. So again, attending conferences, engaging in workshops, becoming more active in social media as we see social media continues to kind of grow and thrive in its own unique way. So finding ways to remain active in those forums to the degree that you feel comfortable. For me, I remember it also was when I would see posts come across listservs, I was very reluctant of oh, I don't have anything to share. I don't really know if I should reply to this. I encourage you to take some of those meaningful risks because you just never know the impact that it will have for someone else on that other side who may be listening to the presentation or who may read your email and be inspired by your words. On my email, in my signature line, I also do include links to my website, my social media platforms, etc. Again, just thinking about ways to build this visibility around the work that you're engaged in. And then last and probably most important is do things that are genuinely aligned with your interests and your personality. So be authentic. Trying to find ways that you can build authenticity as best you can. Not only does it help to build trust and connections, but it's going to make the work that you are doing feel more fulfilling. And then one of the most important things that I probably can't emphasize enough, I probably have way too many professional headshots because every opportunity that I have to take a professional headshot, I will take it. So if your university is offering opportunities for you to take professional headshots, I'd encourage you to go take them. And then when you go to conferences, for example, APA, every year there's a booth for professional headshots. I take a professional headshot every year at APA, as well as any other conference that I attend that has the photo booth set up. So I definitely encourage you to think about just ways to create this presence of what your look looks like, or of your work, but also just who you are as a professional through your headshots. A couple of just images that across the different labs that I have, or the different social media platforms that I have for my research lab in particular. I've spent lots of time during year one of developing the research lab and developing our branding and image. If you are interested in checking out any of our social medias, I don't have them listed here, but these are just some screenshots from our Instagram, a link tree which provides access to our website, our LinkedIn, our Instagram, and our Twitter. This is a screenshot of the landing page of our website and then LinkedIn there. So you'll see the color scheme is really consistent across all of the different platforms. And then the logo design, et cetera, is being something that just taking into consideration with what you want those things to mean to you. So I really wanted a lab that really focused on the aspect of hope, which hope here stands for healing, opportunities, possibilities, and empowerment. So really was wanting colors that felt kind of vibrant and the energy of a site that really helped people to really think about, okay, freedom, liberation, positive expression as well. So happy to talk more about ways to develop online presence when we go into question and answer shortly. This is kind of a broader image of just our logo with the research lab. And then the research lab is listed there in case you all are interested in checking it out, restoringhopelab.com. And then finally, before I turn to the questions that I want to engage in more conversations with you, I want to just share very few resources that were helpful for me, both in my graduate school training as well as things that could be helpful for you as you start to think about pivoting from a graduate student to an early career professional. I'm not sure if you are familiar with the APEX resource guide for psychology graduate students of color. I was one of the authors of the 3rd edition of this as I was transitioning out of my role as chair for the APEX committee on ethnic and racial diversity. But I encourage you to check out this research guide. I'm happy to send it afterwards or provide a link inside the chat, but it provides information about topics such as wellness, self-care, managing imposter syndrome. How do you find funding, both internal and external funding? What about mentorship, or how do you navigate experiences of racism, discrimination, and oppression? within your training program. So just lots of time was really poured into making sure the guide was really fully exhaustive with lots of information that could be helpful, particularly as it relates to the experience of psychology graduate students of color. So I encourage you all to check that resource out if you haven't already. Again, I'll drop a link to that in the chat here in just a moment. And then for those of you who may be interested in going on to the academic job search, one thing that I didn't know about at all until I started the process was understanding that there was a psychology job wiki where lots of institutions post regularly if they have positions available. And I encourage you to actually look at the positions that are available now, so that way you can start to understand what are the qualifications that they're looking for, what type of materials will I need to prepare to be competitive on the academic job market. Are there common themes or threads? You can go back and you can look at previous years as well between what types of institutions continue to have jobs, or maybe there's this particular forecast that you're looking at of seeing if a certain area that you're wanting to kind of specialize in, likelihood that they may have a position available that focuses in that area. So just spending some time looking through the job wiki could be helpful. And then last, using your networks, your mentors. So talking with professors, peers, other individuals in your network about their professional trajectory, asking them about opportunities they may know of, such as postdoctoral sites, or individuals who may be looking for specialized training or assistance in any type of way, utilizing your networks to the best you can. I actually found out about the position at the Institute for the Study of Race and Culture through one of my mentors who encouraged me to apply for it. So I do think that there are just lots of great opportunities that really come through establishing a professional network with others. And last, I'm going to turn, and I have a few questions that I want to ask you all, but I also recognize that you all may want to ask me questions. So I'll put my questions up, but feel free to ask me questions as well. But I thought that potentially we could start here with, what are your biggest concerns about transitioning from a psychology student to a professional in the field? I'm also going to stop sharing my screen now, so that way we can have a little bit more FaceTime as we engage in the conversation. But I do have 3 questions. I'll put all 3 questions. I'll show them now, but I'll put all 3 questions in the chat. But what are your biggest concerns about transitioning from a psychology student to a professional in the field? In what ways do you feel prepared to enter the professional world? And in what ways do you feel like you may need more support or resources? And then last, what skills or knowledge do you think are essential for success in the early stages of a psychology career that we have not covered, or that I did not talk about today? I want to make sure that I take time to answer specific questions or talk about specific things that you all might be thinking about as it relates to the transition from student to profession. And I'm going to stop sharing.
I guess for the first question, like, I'm kind of nervous that I have too many interests now, especially in like our current political climate. I feel myself pulled in a lot of different directions. I want to do as well individual therapy. I want to do family therapy. I want to do systemic work. I want to do like policy work, and I want to be a teacher one day. And it's like I feel pulled in a million different directions, and I don't know if it's even feasible to do all those things, or like I should be doing them in this kind of order to make sure I get to do all of them, or and that I just don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll say that that's definitely one that I struggled with throughout a lot of my time as a graduate student, and I still struggle with today. The thing that I think I probably took away from the experience of not doing a postdoc, jumping straight into doing a tenure track position, is that it forced me to slow down. Because I left graduate school really thinking, remind you, I was both on internship and I was doing this scholar in residence at the same time. Don't advise, but hey, maybe it works. But I think that and I was on the job market, but it really forced me to slow down and think about, wait, this is not sustainable. You can't continue to burn yourself out like this. And the demands start to come in different ways. So for me, right now, I've really focused my energy in establishing my presence with research. And after I get a good grasp on that, I'll be able to pick up this public advocacy piece and engage in more of the public policy work. And then when I feel okay with that, I can take on some clinical clients and start making the change that you want to make in that regard. So understanding that the world is ever evolving and the opportunities for the things that you want to do will always remain there, but you have to remain there to be in the best position possible to actually do the meaningful work that you want to do. So I think the best that you can, trying to break things out into different buckets and really thinking about and questioning your own bandwidth to do certain things and aligning what those things are with your priorities would probably put you in the best position. Yep, great question.
Yeah, I can also kind of go off of that and touching on the third question as well. So I've been hearing this theme, and this might just be on the PhD side of our program. Uh, but what's your take on the importance of publications for being competitive and entering the field in that way?
Yeah, and so to clarify, to be competitive for internship or to be competitive post-internship?
I guess a little bit of both, but mostly internship.
Got it. Okay. So I think that it may vary. Granted, I only have knowledge to speak from my 1 year of experience on the internship market, having reviewed applications for the upcoming kind of cohort that were coming after me, is that I don't think that a lot of emphasis was placed on publication record at that point. But again, I was trained at a counseling center. I did my internship at a college counseling center. So a publication record was not as desirable. And I could easily then imagine that there would be lots of sites and different types of places where they may put more emphasis on research and more emphasis on publication record. I think one of the challenges that I think we're seeing across higher education and across different professional career levels in higher education, starting from the entry point of students applying to graduate school, is that what the publication record looks like nowadays is completely different than what publication records looked like before, to where you are starting to see students having many more publications than what might typically have been expected for a typical like PhD student. So I do think it's something that is important to think about, but I don't think that it's a necessarily like going to be a make it or break it deal with regards to what you want to do for internship or beyond.
So oh, sorry. My name,
Thank you.
yeah, my name is Dr. Williams. I'm at the Fresno Clinical PhD program, and I do the Director of Clinical Training. I think that if you're applying to an internship that has a research track, I think that matters. And, there's the research essay also that needs to be submitted. But I don't know if it's extremely important. I think that if they see like, oh, they did some poster conferences and submitted some manuscripts, that's like a boost to your CV. But I think it's more about like the clinical work and the clinical experience for internship, unless it's a research track. And then something that Kai had said that I resonate with, even as an assistant professor, is like all of these opportunities, I'm afraid that they're going to pass me by if I don't like grab onto it when it's first offered to me. And I don't know if that's because of like my intersectionality, that I feel like, okay, I only have this one chance to get it. And if I don't, it's just going to go away. Am I like creating a false association between my intersectionality and opportunities? But
Yeah, that's a good point. And the opportunities will come back around. I think that's another point as well. We feel like, I need to jump on this now because it won't come back. In many cases, it will.
My concern is on the opposite end of that, though. I am always worried about having to always be overqualified to get what I want, always having to be better than the other person. And that's, I don't know if it's a question or a comment. It's just more, that's where my concern is. I'm always afraid that I have to be more qualified than the next person just because of who I am. And I've lived that already in other careers that I've had prior to this. So how does that stack up? Do we still fall into that category?
Great question. And I think that as people of color, I don't know if there will ever, I'm optimistic and I hope, but I also don't know if that will ever be a part of our lived reality. both internally of how we experience ourselves, but also externally in how individuals are responding to us with regards to their perceptions and their evaluations and the criteria of what they're looking for. I'll say from my own kind of personal experience, it was again going back to this counter narrative aspect of when I was on the academic job market. For one, I didn't think I'd get any interviews because of my intersectional experiences, and a lot of the ways in which I understand racism and systemic oppression to really operate, specifically as it relates to being a formerly incarcerated Black man who is navigating this professional landscape. And in some situations, that was absolutely confirmed. I would be completely lying to you if I'd say that I entered the job market and I did not experience individuals who questioned safety, who questioned whether or not the work that I was doing was valuable, or who questioned whether or not I was deserving in lots of ways to be in the position of higher education and doing the things that I'm currently doing now. So all the feelings, they were really validated in that moment. And just as much as they were validated in that moment, there were definitely still spaces where the counter narratives definitely rung true. There were people who were like, no, I want you because of this specific aspect of your experience and lived in identities. So I think it's just really reminding yourself that in some cases you absolutely will be compared to, or feel as if you have this pressure to perform and compete and be higher than others. But the same is also true. There will be people who look for you specifically for who you are and the value and the contribution that you offer, where you won't be valued, or you won't, or they at least won't be valuing you based off of any aspect of you having to work harder, being perceived as working harder than somebody else. But I do want to just validate and resonate the anxiety that kind of comes with that, and hopefully offer some words that helps to kind of mitigate that, because I do think it's a part of our experience, it's a part of our history, and it's something that if we look at history, we've also overcome as people.
I have kind of like a personal question for you, sir.
Yep, absolutely.
I know a lot of people who have also been through a similar experience with incarceration who were not able to kind of get back on their feet and kind of, re-tackle life in the way that you have. How did you kind of overcome like a lot of the mental trauma and like the stigma associated with it, and like how were you able to overcome that when other people are just obviously very struggling to do so?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And I do think that it is an individual kind of journey in that aspect, and then there's lots of things that are attached with it. For example, I had lots of social support that really helped to cultivate my ability to, for one, re-enroll back in school and go back and get my education. And then when I was in school, there was lots of individuals within the college who were really supportive with regards to wanting to make sure that I got what I needed to graduate, et cetera. So I think part of it was really thinking about the community and the mentors who helped kind of spearhead things along the way. But that does not come with different barriers and obstacles that were absolutely still there. For example, I can think about for sure the first 3 to 4 years, employment barriers. Even within, and I'll say this, if you look at the article that I had up was called Ban the Box. And it was really thinking about professional psychology's role in perpetuating systemic racism through different procedures and practices, such as a criminal history record disclosure question on applications. For me, I encountered that, for one, on graduate school applications, there were definitely graduate school applications that I completed there that had the question, and in one case in particular, they routed my application to the Dean of Students office, and the Dean of Students office said that your application actually can't move forward because of this question being checked. So I didn't even get the opportunity to have my application reviewed and evaluated before the decision was made. And fast forward a little bit, when I was in my first doctoral training program, I applied for APA membership. And at that point, APA actually had it on their membership application, where if you were convicted of a felony, you had to check it off, and then they required you to provide lots of documentation, such as a letter of support from someone who was an APA member, copies of your court records, etc. So lots of different barriers. And through my work with some colleagues and peers, et cetera, APA has since changed that. They've actually removed the question from their membership application. But I point to it as an example of like different types of systemic barriers that still are in place, and that having the mentorship and support to help me navigate those things in different ways help to cultivate this lived reality that I now have as well. So I do recognize that people's experiences in doing that is challenging, and it definitely takes a different type of mental and emotional toll.
Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
So I have a question. As an administrator, I've had students who have had trouble adjusting to like practicum and just kind of having the exposure to patients who are undergoing a lot of trauma. So do you have any suggestions in that regard for like that preparation mentally?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the hardest parts, so I didn't talk as much about some of my clinical training experiences, but when I was a doctoral student, I did majority of my work. Starting off, we had a department clinic, so I did my first year or two inside of our department clinic, and from there, I worked at an acute inpatient psychiatric hospital in Fargo, North Dakota, where I worked with both adults and adolescents who were experiencing lots of suicidal ideation and lots of other types of behavioral disturbances. From there, I transitioned to work at the North Dakota State Hospital, where I worked in their sex offender treatment and evaluation unit, primarily offering individual and group-based therapy services for individuals who had cluster B personality diagnoses, such as borderline personality, antisocial, narcissistic personality disorder. So all of those were really challenging situations, and I think that they were very helpful situations for me in lots of ways. And I have lots of actually interest and passion in doing the clinical work. One thing, to go back to the question, one thing that I do think was really helpful for me to engage in, going back to the self-reflection piece, is thinking about what is it that has me in this service and what is it that I'm wanting to accomplish? Is that thing that I'm wanting to accomplish in the short term or in the long term? For example, you're meeting a client and you're recognizing this client is experiencing lots of distress in the moment. The immediate pull that's probably tugging on you in some ways, that's impacting your presence in that space, is I want to alleviate the pain that this person is feeling, and I want to create a different experience for this person. In recognizing what is pain in that moment and what does alleviating pain look like? Does it mean the complete the resolution of whatever the problem is being gone, or is it this instance of instilling some degree of hope that looks a little bit differently than what that interaction looked like prior to their engagement with you? If I can reconceptualize how I'm understanding change and how I'm understanding progress, then it made it a little bit more rewarding for me as the clinician coming in and working with the individual. And it alleviates a little bit of the pressure that you then felt around, wait, this person's experiencing lots of trauma, and I don't know what to do with it. Well, how did you help the person today? Starting there, how did you help the person today? The person came in, they had a conversation with you, they engaged with you. Understanding that in itself is progress, and recognizing your own growth through the different challenges. So I think that was one aspect that really helped me as an early clinician in the graduate training, alleviating some of the pressure that I felt from the stress of working with individuals who were experiencing a lot of different clinical concerns. And then the other part is really finding ways to cultivate your own community. So for one, recognizing the value even in the smallest interactions that you have with clients, and two, making sure that you're sustained by having a community around you that helps to provide support, mentorship, guidance, and uplifting you as you're doing the work. Otherwise, the emotional toll that you're carrying with you from seeing the clients is going to wear you down. So you have to really make sure that you have a balance in that regard.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I can see that you've done a lot of research. And so I guess my question is, what was the most rewarding part? I see that it's ongoing still. So in doing everything that you do, especially as it relates to race and racism, what has been the most rewarding part about like disseminating that information to people?
Yeah. You know, so this is not a published study, um, but I'm currently doing a study where I am interviewing formerly incarcerated or justice involved Black men, and I'm learning about their experiences of navigating racism within the criminal legal system and how it has impacted their understanding of themselves as well as their understanding about their possible futures. So really thinking about from a possible selves theory perspective, what opportunities really lie ahead of them. And lots of ways I find so much hope and inspiration in talking with the community participants, understanding their narratives and their lived experience, because I think there's this huge like yearning for someone to listen and to understand and to validate the experiences and to help think creatively about how do we create change in different systems. So on days where I feel like I'm tired, I can think about some of the participants that I've interacted with in those virtual interviews, and that gives me a little bit of energy to continue going. It continues to bring me back to my why around why do I do this? Why is this important? So for me, the biggest accomplishment that I have in my clinical engagement is really still centered in community of thinking about the individuals that I'm wanting to serve and the impact that I'm wanting to create for individuals navigating similar circumstances.
I love that. Recidivism is a really big issue, and it's really important.
Absolutely.
Hi, Dr. Taylor. I'm not entirely sure if someone answered this. I came in a little late and I apologize.
No worries.
Um, I'm in my fourth year transitioning into internship, and as I navigate through all these places and all these people and I see all these things, I notice that I find my sense of self getting smaller as I navigate from place to place, and being in these predominantly white institutions, going into these other in this internship position in some of these predominantly white institutions, we have to navigate code switch all the buzzwords. But how do you come out of that and still feel like yourself? I understand if we have to play the game, but how do you switch back?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so the question that I'll leave for you in that regard is who says you have to switch? In particular, really challenging the aspect of code switching, because I think that sometimes what happens and I think that even my own lived experience in context and reality, I still struggle with it because I do feel like there's this aspect that we have as Black folks where we say that, oh, I have to code switch because I want to be professional, I want to be perceived as being desired, or that I belong in this space. But the more that you can move to that understanding that you belong regardless of how you present yourself or how you're showing up, is that you are in a space that you can define what that belongingness looks like. It moves you away from this aspect of saying, I'm code switching in this moment versus I'm being my authentic self. So going back to this authenticity, the more you can move yourself towards being authentic in these different interactions that you're having as you navigate these different environments, the more you realize that your presence is desired, it's valued, and it doesn't necessarily need to change from one interaction to another. That said, though, I do think that there are parts of things that we naturally will still need to engage in professional context, et cetera, but it doesn't mean that we have to diminish our identity, our unique aspects of lived experience, our realities in a way only to conform to standards that another group has deemed as being acceptable or appropriate. So I think, again, the more that you can kind of position your mindset in that aspect of I am here because I am here and I deserve and it is worthy of me. I am worth being here. Then the more that you counter those internalized messages that tell you otherwise.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Really good question to actually think about.
Okay, I realize that the hour is far spent, and I do not want to hold our guest any longer. So we will end the Q&A section here. Dr. Taylor, were there any last minute things that you wanted to note before I close this out?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thank you for the invitation. I really just enjoyed the opportunity to hear from you all and to just talk. I appreciate the work that you all are doing. So just stay engaged, stay motivated, and encouraged.
Thank you so much. And I just want to note, this was so incredibly necessary. I think, especially for students, but seeing faculty joining as well and interacting was so, I think, just necessary and so great. I think what really resonates with me, and just what I loved hearing was some of the motivations from my peers, from my colleagues about why they got into the field, but also what really resonated with me was how you mentioned being intentional about cultivating our own lanes as we develop our professional identity. And so, and also considering the impact that we're going to have. Kai had mentioned, having so many different avenues that he wanted to explore. And that's my thing as well. I have so many different things that I want to do, but it is encouraging to hear that I don't have to blaze into the field. I can sort of take the opportunities as they come and things will circle back. So thank you so much for sharing that. This does conclude our Black Table Talk. Again, thank you, Dr. Taylor, for spending this hour with us and lending your expertise to our students and our faculty. I also want to thank the BSA e-board who is on, our members, Alliance students, and guests for joining us today, as well as faculty. This segment was recorded, and so it will be posted on our BSA YouTube channel next week. So be on the lookout for a link to the video from our organization. Again, thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Absolutely. Take care, y'all.